Imagine you are standing on a dusty road. The year is 622 CE. The sun is brutal. Your sandals are worn through from weeks of walking. Your throat is dry. Your heart is racing. And then you crest a small rocky hill, and for the first time, you see it. A valley. Green. Impossibly green for Arabia, date palms stretching as far as your eyes can see, their long shadows cutting dark lines across golden earth, the smell of water in the air, real water, gardens, life. After weeks in the desert, this sight would have broken something open inside your chest. This was Yathrib, soon to be renamed by the man riding beside you, soon to become the most important city in Islamic history, soon to become Al-Madinah al-Munawwara, the city of light. But on this day, it was just a valley, waiting, and the man riding toward it was about to change it and the entire world forever. Before we talk about what the Prophet found when he arrived, we need to understand what Yathrib actually was before Islam, because almost nobody talks about this. Yathrib was not a small village. It was not an insignificant settlement. It was actually one of the most strategically important locations in the entire Arabian Peninsula, sitting at the crossroads of major ancient trade routes connecting Yemen in the south to Syria in the north. The city was built on a volcanic rocky plain called the Hara, vast fields of black volcanic rock spreading out on its eastern and western edges, making it naturally defendable from almost any direction. Two major Arab tribes dominated the city, the Aus and the Khazraj. They had been locked in brutal tribal warfare for over 100 years before the Prophet arrived. Three powerful Jewish tribes, Banu Kainuka, Banu Nadir, and Banu Qurayza, controlled the economy, the trade, the money, and much of the agricultural land. This was a city of tension, of ancient grudges, of blood feuds passed down through generations. Now let us talk about the land itself, because the geography of Medina is extraordinary, and it shaped everything that happened there. The city sat in a fertile valley approximately 600 meters above sea level, giving it a slightly cooler climate than the burning coastal plains of Arabia. The volcanic Hara fields on the east and west were not just defensive barriers, they were also markers of the agricultural heart of the city. Between them and within them, the land was fertile, unusually, remarkably fertile for Arabia, fed by underground water sources that pushed up through the volcanic rock and created natural wells and springs across the valley. Date palms dominated the landscape, not dozens, not hundreds, thousands upon thousands of date palms, their roots reaching deep into the underground water, their canopies creating a green landscape that would have seemed almost miraculous to anyone arriving from the harsh Arabian desert. Wheat fields, barley fields, vegetable gardens, all of it fed by this hidden underground network of ancient water. This was an oasis city, but one with walls, tribes, politics, and centuries of complicated history buried in its soil. To truly understand what the Prophet walked into, you need to understand the power structure of Yathrib. Think of it like this. Imagine a city run by 5 rival gangs who all hate each other but need each other to survive. That was Yathrib in 622 CE. The Aus tribe controlled the southern parts of the city and the agricultural lands in that direction. The Khazraj were larger, more powerful, controlling the northern settlements and more of the date palm gardens. Between them, over 100 years of war, real war, brutal, bloody generational war, where sons avenged fathers who had avenged grandfathers. The most recent and devastating conflict, the Battle of Bu'ath, had happened just a few years before the Prophet's arrival, leaving both tribes exhausted, depleted, and desperately hungry for peace and leadership. Then the 3 Jewish tribes, Banu Kainuka, controlling the market and goldsmithing, Banu Nadir, owning some of the most fertile agricultural land, Banu Qurayza, settled in fortified strongholds in the south. Each tribe had its own fortress, its own wells, its own alliances, its own weapons, and every single one of them was about to encounter something none of them had ever seen before. So how did the prophet actually end up here specifically? The answer to this question is one of the most beautiful stories in early Islamic history. During the annual pilgrimage season in Mecca, before the Hijra, tribal delegations from across Arabia would come to Mecca, and the Prophet would use these seasons to speak to people, to share his message, to invite them to Islam. Most rejected him, most turned away, some mocked him. But in 620 CE, something different happened. A small group of men from the Khazraj tribe of Yathrib stopped and listened, really listened. And what they heard changed everything. They had heard from their Jewish neighbors in Yathrib about a coming prophet, a final messenger. And as they sat with Muhammad and heard his words, something clicked. This was him. They returned to Yathrib and told their people. The following year, more came, men and women both. And in 622 CE, at a secret nighttime meeting at a place called Aqaba, just outside Mecca, they made a formal pledge. Come to us. We will protect you. We will protect your companions, as we protect our own children, our own blood. Yathrib was calling, and the Prophet was preparing to answer. The date was the 12th of Rabi al-Awwal, 622 CE. The Prophet and his companion, Abu Bakr RDA, had already survived the terrifying journey from Mecca, hiding for 3 days in the cave of Thawr, while Quraysh search parties hunted them with drawn swords and offered 100 camels to anyone who brought them back dead or alive. They had traveled through scorching desert by night, guided by a hired tracker who knew secret routes. And now they had arrived at the outskirts of Yathrib. Word had spread through the city like fire. He is coming. He is here. The Prophet is here. And what happened next is one of the most extraordinary scenes in all of human history. The entire city came out, men, women, children, pouring out of their homes and gardens and running towards the approaching riders. The women of Medina stood on their rooftops, some historians say, singing, Tala al-Badru alayna, the full moon has risen upon us. Children ran alongside his camel. Old men wept openly in the dusty road. Grown warriors who had never bowed to any man pressed forward just to catch one glimpse. So what did the Prophet actually see when he entered Yathrib for the first time? Let us reconstruct it, historically, carefully. The city had no single center, no grand plaza, no palace district. It was instead a collection of distinct neighborhoods called mahallat, each one essentially a self-contained settlement belonging to a specific clan or family group. Each neighborhood had its own cluster of date palm gardens, its own wells, its own homes, and, critically, its own fortified stronghold called an utum. These were tall, square towers of black volcanic stone, rising several stories above the surrounding date palm gardens, used as both watchtowers and places of refuge during tribal raids. The streets between neighborhoods were narrow, sometimes barely wide enough for 2 people to pass. Unpaved, dusty in dry season, muddy rivers in the rare rains. The homes lining these streets were simple: mud brick walls, low doorways, flat roofs made of palm trunks laid close together and covered with a layer of packed earth and clay. No glass in the windows, no elaborate architecture, but between every cluster of homes, date palms. Always date palms. The green canopy of this ancient oasis city stretching over everything like a living roof. Let us go deeper into what these homes actually looked like before the Prophet arrived, because this is where most people have absolutely no idea about the reality of early Medina. The typical home in Yathrib at the time of the Prophet's arrival was extraordinarily humble by almost any standard. The outer walls were built from a combination of mud brick, called Liban, and volcanic basalt stone from the surrounding Hara fields. These walls were thick, sometimes nearly half a meter thick, which kept the interiors relatively cool in summer and warm in the cool desert nights.
The homes were built around a central open courtyard, a simple rectangle of packed earth open to the sky, with rooms opening off each side. One room for sleeping, one for storage, sometimes a small cooking area, a basic covered area for animals. The rooftops were flat and usable. Families slept on their roofs during the hot summer months, caught whatever breeze existed, and stored goods up there during cooler seasons. There was very little furniture as we would understand it today. Woven palm leaf mats on the floor for sitting and sleeping, a simple wooden post or hook on the wall for hanging belongings, a clay pot for water, a grinding stone for grain. That was the interior of a typical Medinan home in 622 CE.
The prophet's camel entered Yathrib on that extraordinary day and walked through the crowded streets while everyone pressed forward trying to grab its reins, desperate for the honor of hosting the prophet at their home. Every family wanted him, every clan extended its invitation, and the prophet, in his profound wisdom, refused to choose. He let the camel walk freely, and wherever it stops, that is where I will stay, he said. The camel walked and walked through the pressing crowds, past outstretched hands and tearful faces, until it reached a specific open plot of land belonging to two young orphan boys of the Banu Najjar clan, used as a simple open-air yard for drying dates. The camel stopped, knelt, and did not move. The prophet looked at this plot of empty, humble, ordinary land, and he smiled. He purchased it from the orphan boys immediately, insisting on paying full price despite their offering it freely as a gift. And on this land, this simple date-drying yard, he would build the first mosque of Medina. Not a palace, not a fortress, a place of prayer. That decision told the entire city exactly who this man was. The construction of Masjid al-Nabawi began immediately. And what is extraordinary, what is profoundly moving about this story, is that the prophet himself carried the bricks. The leader of a growing movement, a man entire tribes had pledged to die protecting, and he carried bricks alongside the poorest of his companions. They worked together in the burning sun. No architects, no engineers, no paid labor force, just the early Muslim community, Muhajirun, who had fled Mecca with nothing, and Ansar, who had given up everything to host them, working side by side, hand to hand, building something together. The mosque was simple beyond imagination. The walls were made of mud brick and stone. The roof was supported by the trunks of palm trees, raw, unstripped, rough, planted directly into the earth as columns. The roof itself was made of palm fronds and leaves laid across beams of palm wood, so thin and loosely woven that rain came straight through. The floor was plain packed earth, no tiles, no carpet, no decoration of any kind. The entire structure measured approximately 35 meters by 30 meters. Humble, open, completely honest, and it became the beating heart of an entire civilization. Now here is what most history channels miss completely about the prophet's arrival in Medina. Yes, he built a mosque, but simultaneously, he engineered one of the most remarkable social transformations in the history of any city anywhere on earth. Remember those two Arab tribes, the Aus and Khazraj, locked in a century of bloodshed? The prophet did something that no tribal leader, no military commander, no political genius had managed to do in over 100 years of trying. He paired every Muslim refugee from Mecca, the Muhajirun, with a local Muslim host from Medina, the Ansar, not as guests, not as temporary visitors, as brothers, literally. He stood pairs of men together and declared them brothers in Islam. And this was not symbolic. This brotherhood had real legal weight, real economic implications. The Ansar shared their homes, their date palm gardens, their income, their food, equally with the Muhajirun, strangers, who had arrived owning nothing but the clothes on their backs. The level of generosity recorded in Islamic history from the Ansar of Medina toward the Muhajirun refugees has arguably never been matched by any community anywhere in human history. Within months of arriving, the prophet did something that would not be done anywhere else in the world for over 1,000 years. He wrote a constitution.
Historians call it the Constitution of Medina, or Sahifat al-Medina, and it is one of the most remarkable political documents in human history. It established Medina as a single unified community, Ummah, comprised of Muslims, Jews, and pagan Arabs together. Every tribe was listed by name. Every tribe's rights were spelled out explicitly. The document established collective security. If any member community of Medina was attacked from outside, all communities were obligated to defend together. It established freedom of religion. The Jewish tribes were explicitly guaranteed the right to practice their faith without interference. It established a system for resolving disputes. All major disagreements would be brought to Muhammad for arbitration. It abolished the pre-Islamic custom of collective punishment, where an entire tribe suffered for one man's crime. And critically, it established that the loyalty of every resident of Medina was to the city itself, above any tribal loyalty. In the ancient tribal world of Arabia, this was nothing short of revolutionary. Within just 1 year of the Prophet's arrival, Yathrib was almost unrecognizable. The change was not primarily in its buildings or its streets. The change was in its people. The ancient blood feud between Aus and Khazraj, 100 years of killing, simply stopped, not through military force, not through political pressure, but because both tribes had found something larger than their grievance to believe in. The economic exploitation of the old market system was dismantled and replaced with a free and fair trading space where every person had equal access. The treatment of the poor, the orphan, the widow, the slave changed fundamentally and rapidly as Islamic values took root in daily life. New words entered the daily vocabulary of the city. Salam, peace, became the standard greeting between strangers. Sadaqah, voluntary charity, became a daily practice. Shura, consultation, became the basis of community decision-making. The city that had been defined by division, by tribal identity, by who your grandfather was and who he had killed, began to redefine itself by something new, by something the world had never quite seen in this form before, a community built not on blood, but on belief. So, what did Medina look like when the Prophet arrived? It looked like a city on the edge, exhausted by war, divided by tribe, controlled by those with economic power. Its streets were narrow and dusty. Its homes were mud and stone. Its palm gardens were beautiful, but contested. Its people were proud and fierce, and desperately tired of fighting each other. It looked, in many ways, like a city that had no reason to become anything special. And yet, within years of that camel kneeling on a date-drying yard, this city would become the capital of a civilization that would stretch from Spain to Central Asia. The laws written in that simple mud-brick mosque would govern millions of people across centuries. The social experiment started in those narrow, dusty streets would become a model studied by political philosophers 1,000 years later. Medina did not look like the future when the Prophet arrived. It looked like any other tired, ancient city in the middle of the Arab desert. But that's the thing about divine purpose. It never announces itself with a palace. It arrives quietly on the back of a camel and changes everything.